For this episode, I'd like to start with a question. It's simply this: where will you be? Where will your household be in the next year? When you're back in this exact spot in 12 months, what will have unfolded over that year? What small gains will you have made? What losses will you have sustained? How will you have seen God move? All of this stems from the idea that you are the God-appointed leader in your household as a function of your headship and your submission to Christ. So what is your vision? I can tell you that the enemy would love nothing more than for fierce men to flounder and flail without vision in their lives. Do you have a vision, fierce man? As I'll cover briefly today, you can have a vision for your life that is an outworking of your submission to Christ. But he is calling you, fierce man, as the head of your household, to lead them with a vision and with a mission. Cheers once again, and hello to all the fierce men out there. This is the Fierce Men Show, the Fierce Men Podcast, where men come to be sharpened, strengthened, and sent to build Christ's kingdom in their heads, hearts, households, and homelands. We don't want our nation to be the same. We don't want our households to be the same. We want to see Christ reign as king in every inch of creation, and that's what Fierce Men is all about. So welcome to the movement. If you haven't yet, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel to continue to get this content as we're building culture, as we're building out the Fierce Men movement in the coming year. I'm very excited for what the next year holds. So I pray and I ask that you would go to fiercemen.us and find the green button there. If you haven't yet, join the Fierce Men band group. That's where the announcements will be made. We're going to be doing events, gatherings, and Lord willing, do some merch and stuff like that in the coming months. But I'm very excited for where Fierce Men is headed. I'm very encouraged by the caliber of men who are coming. They're not perfect, but they want to see their lives completely reigned by the lordship of Christ. That, of course, starts in their heads and in their hearts and works its way out into their households and into their communities. So fiercemen.us, find that green button. All right. So in the last video, I talked about your role as the leader in your household. That leadership is a necessary outworking of headship. That good leadership, competent leadership, flows out from a submission to Christ and seeing that he was the leader of his church. He's calling us to lead in love as he leads and loves his church. And I gave you some tangible ways to think through that there, but maybe it can feel like a lot. Okay. It can feel like maybe it's too much to wrap your head around. Well, today I just want to walk you through how the tool that I've used over the past decade to lead our household. I venture to say that it's been useful. It's been fruitful. It's not been perfect. And so I want to give it to you as just something to get you thinking. Certainly don't feel like you have to take the Frederick way of doing things, but I think it'll get you thinking in these categories. And in fact, I want to give to you, I have an ebook that I wrote, How to Craft Your Own Family Vision Statement. If you go to fiercemen.us/vision, that's fiercemen.us/vision, that will just take you to a PDF that you can download. You can add it to your phone. You can add it to whatever reading device. It's a very quick read, and it will get you well on your way toward establishing at least a first version of what a family vision statement for your household might look like. So as fierce men, I would encourage you to do that. Here's a staggering statistic. All right. We did a poll. So if you're not aware, we have fierce marriage, we have fierce parenting. Those are aspects of the ministry the Lord has called us into for the season of our lives. And so there's hundreds of thousands of people. I went there and I asked them, hey, do you have a mission statement for your household? And asked the men, do you have a written down vision or mission for your home? And only about 6%, so 94% of families had nothing. In other words, only about 6% of those households had any sort of written mission or vision, right? That's just a little over a 20th. And these are Christian households. And so that was a mind-blowing realization to me. And that's what actually led me to write the How to Craft a Family Vision Statement ebook, is to just help families just get one step further down the path of creating a mission and vision for their household. So I'll start with this. I'm going to walk you through our plan, but I want to give you kind of the biblical call up front. Having a vision for your household isn't just a practical idea. It's not just useful, but it's a staunchly biblical one. The Bible calls us to count our days. Psalm 90 verses 12. This is one of my life verses that I repeat regularly to remind myself of my finitude. It says, so teach us to number our days, to know our finitude, in order that we might gain a heart of wisdom. There is wisdom to be had, knowing that you have only a fixed number of days. We won't live forever. You won't be young forever. You won't be in the prime earning years of your life forever. We need to count our days that we might have a heart of wisdom. We're also called to live wisely. In Ephesians 5:15, he says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. What does it mean to walk wisely? Does it mean just to look down where you're going so you don't trip and fall? No, it means to head in the right direction. It means to make godly, God-fearing, wise decisions in light of his created order. That he is the creator, we are a creature, but we are, as men, are called to be heads over our households, and we are called to govern and love and serve our households by leading them, not just any old way, but to lead them wisely. It's a biblical call to have a plan. We're also called to make the best use of our time. We're not going to live forever. As I mentioned, Colossians 4:5 says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. We don't waste our time. We think soberly about ourselves and about our lives. Romans 12:3 says, for by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. We are to think soberly, wisely about our lives. Not only are we called to think wisely and circumspectly about our decisions and where we're headed as a household, but we're also called to write it down. We see this as a precedent. We don't see a scripture that says, hey, write down your family mission statement. We don't see that in scripture, but we see a precedent for writing things down so that they might not be forgotten and so they can be referenced quickly. In Habakkuk 2:2, it says, and the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that he may run who reads it. Of course, the prophecy is about something not related to family vision statements, but the principle is we write something down, we write the vision down that it might be easily read, that he who reads it could run with it. There's precedent in scripture for writing things down, for not forgetting the things that then are written down. All of that to say there is a biblical precedent on top of the last video that I created, but there is a biblical precedent for having a sharp vision, for having it written down as the heads of our households. Now, in terms of how I work this out in our own lives, I'll give you a bit of a backstory. When I've been self-employed for about 15 years now. And when we first had our daughter, so we have 4 daughters now, but when our first daughter was just born, we were living in Southern California. I had a web development agency down there, and we were just getting into the fierce marriage stuff at that point. And all of my income was coming from working on my laptop, working online. So we had all these options, and a lot of people are in that situation now. There's a lot of people who are working remotely, maybe self-employed. You're not really attached to a location per se. Now, I think we need to be attached to location, which is why we actually moved back home. But we found ourselves in that time not realizing that we needed the community that we have now, but really struggling to find what should we do, right? We know we need a change. We know that we're not called to that specific area in Southern California, but where and to what? And what kind of life are we going to set up? And we found ourselves paralyzed by the number of options. Now, it's not because we had all kinds of money. We were living hand to mouth. But in terms of lifestyle, in terms of the type of house we could afford or the type of place we wanted to live in and the types of people we wanted to be around, we just had too many options. We needed a rubric, a way to think through things that was not just arbitrary. And so in my angst as a husband, I was trying to figure this out because we were arguing about it. We were having late night conversations. We were getting nowhere. And so I basically sat down and just prayed and said, Lord, I need some direction. I need you to help me create some guardrails for these conversations so we can actually be making decisions wisely and not just thinking about things like climate or house prices, but we want to live on mission. We have a very short time on earth. We want to live on mission and we want to be spirit-led in this. And so this family vision statement was the outworking of that whole process. And I venture to say it took me about a month to figure this out, to iterate, to figure out what is that first draft of a mission statement. So as you think through this, it's the beginning of the year, maybe, and you might think I need to have it done by, the first weekend of the year. I'm telling you, give yourself some time, give yourself some grace, but stay on it and don't let it just fade as the year goes on. But I'd say by the end of the first month of the year, by the end of January, try to have a first draft of this worked out. And again, go to fiercemen.us/vision to download the ebook of this. But I'm just going to walk through what that ebook says here. So the Frederick Family Vision Statement has 3 components. Number 1, the mission statement. Number 2, our core values. And number 3, our envision statements. I'm going to walk through what each one is. So the mission statement is it's the why. It describes why you exist as a family succinctly and then with specific action-oriented and enlivening language. Right? It's the rally point. It's the place where you go when you're making a decision. We've used this in terms of filtering through what kind of vehicle we should purchase, home purchases, investments we've made. We've used this mission statement as the rally point for us to go back to and say, does this actually fit within within what the Lord is calling us to do? Doesn't mean your mission statement can't flex and change as life changes, but this has become the rally point for us. And so I'll just read to you our mission statement. It starts out broad and then it gets it narrows itself down. And by the way, I just edited this because I came back to it and it was far too inspecific. And so Selena and I are actually working through this as well in real time. But as of now, as of the recording of this video, our mission statement is this: the Frederick family exists to know, love, and serve God in household, church, and community. Now that's very broad. And so I added these subpoints and I said, we do this by, and there's 5 things. We do this by being students of the Bible and disciples of Christ. 2 Timothy 3:16-17, added verse references to ours. We do this by raising and educating our children in the paideia of God. Paideia is the Greek word that's under Ephesians 6:4. It says, raise your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. It's the enculturation of our children into the things of God. They are Christian children before anything else. So what does it mean to be distinctly Christian in the worldview, if you will? The paideia of God. I encourage you to do a study on the word paideia. It's phenomenal. We also fulfill our mission by engaging deeply in our local church. We prioritize the church over and above almost everything else. The 4th way we do this is we publish books. This is speaking specifically to our family industry. We publish books that exalt Christ, edify the church, and build God's kingdom. I reference Acts 20:24, Proverbs 11:33. Then finally, we know, love, and serve God in household, church, and community by building businesses with wisdom, diligence, and integrity. Currently, as I'm recording this, we have 2 businesses. I'm always thinking about what the Lord might have for us. Of course, running short on time these days, so that's not something I'm doing actively right now, but I'm constantly looking, praying through what that might look like. And that's driven by a larger mission for me, which I won't get into, but basically the idea that we need more Christian business owners. And in fact, stay tuned to the channel. I'm going to interview a close brother about demystifying business acquisitions, entrepreneurship. I think we have a very unique opportunity as Christian men in the coming decades. As boomers are retiring out and selling their businesses, there's a very unique opportunity for Christian men to take dominion in the area of business and building institutions and things like that. So that's our mission statement. I would encourage you to think through, what is your mission as a household? Again, I'm holding this out just as one example. I'm not saying follow this exact example, but I encourage you to think through these terms. What is the big why? And then how will you go about doing that why as a household? The second component to a vision statement that I mentioned is core values. So core values is one of these tricky things that people will often think through it like, what are our aspirations? What kinds of values do we want to say that we hold as a family? And actually, I would encourage you to do something slightly different. This section is a list of terms that are actually descriptors. They're not aspirational, but they're describing who you are and what you care about intrinsically. I mean, how are you wired? How have you been wired? And how is God going to use those core values? I'm not talking about virtues. We all want to be patient, kind, loving, all the virtues, wise. But what are the things you actually intrinsically value that are going to give you a unique posture and position to fulfill the mission that God has placed before you as a household? So I'll just share with you what ours are. And again, this is probably the hardest part, to be honest, because it's really hard to get past the aspirational impulse to think, well, we want to be this, and so that's our core value. No, try to think through like what is the gravitational pull for your household? How do you gravitate, even before you had kids? How as a couple did you tend to operate and function? So for us, we realized that one of the underlying principles that governed our financial life was not necessarily amassing wealth, but it was more so we wanted to be faithful stewards. We realized that in lack or in plenty, Christ is king over it all. And so our first core value is actually stewardship and dominion. Stewardship and dominion. In other words, we own nothing. We are stewards of all that God entrusts into our care. So we will live with open hands, knowing that our life is a river and not a reservoir. We're rivers, not a reservoir. In other words, things will flow in and out of our lives because God is the owner of it all. And sometimes he entrusts us with a lot. We want to steward that well. Sometimes he entrusts us with a little, and we want to also steward that well. So that's our number one core value, is dominion and stewardship. Our second core value is church and community. Now, this one was so key when we were making that decision 10, 12 years back. We realized that if we've always valued our family community, we've always valued our friends, we've always valued the church. If we make a decision outside of those factors, that we are in fact rejecting a core value that God's given us. Now, I would argue that church and community should be values in every Christian's life, but specifically in our family dynamic, we really wanted to be close to our family because we value the multi-generational aspect. So this one could be maybe the more universal of our core values, but church and community. So in other words, we are designed for community. And this actually came out of living in isolation. As we were in a transition period, we actually moved to one of my favorite places on earth. It's a little town called Westport, Washington. People have joked, they've called it a little drinking town with a fishing problem. But we were living there for 6 months as we were kind of trying to figure all this stuff out. I was writing a lot. We were raising, our daughter was not even a year old yet. And we were living there, and I just saw my wife wither because we lacked community. Even though I loved it, I was flourishing. I realized, no, she has to have community. So I can't move her far out into the boonies and expect her to flourish. And so that actually drove us more inland to be around our family and then to establish a stronger church community. Our third core value is faith-filled action. Now, this came out of a conviction that, the more general version of this core value would be something like faith. Like, of course, we value faith. But we found over the life of our decades-old marriage that we tend to lean toward action. But I want it to be faith-filled action. I don't want it to be fear-based action or ambition-driven action. I want to be ambitious, but I want to be ambitious in light of Christ, because of Christ. So we want faith-filled action. In other words, we fear God. He is God. We are not. So we obey him and trust him to be God while living wisely and taking risks that are faith-filled. And as we're faith-filled, we are praying, expecting, hoping that the faith will bear fruit. Now, of course, God is in charge of that fruit, but we want to be people who take faith-filled action. This is one of our core values. Our fourth core value is family and created ordinance. Now, what do I mean by that? So family is foundational to every flourishing society. And so we as a household, we specifically value family as an outworking of the mission. That's why we have Fierce Marriage, Fierce Parenting, the books we've written, even Fierce Men. I see Fierce Men as the tip of the spear in terms of taking back ground, because fierce men lead fierce families, lead fierce communities, right? So we want to honor God's vision for family as if it's actually true. We want to see Christ as king over family. We want to see, and as a result, we want to see Christ as king over, of course, his own church and over communities that those families and churches occupy. We want to live in light of God's created ordinance, his created order for family, church, and community. And that starts with family, which is the area that God has given us as a household to minister within. And then finally, our fifth core value is missional fruitfulness. In other words, life is short. We want to do work that creates eternal fruit. We don't want to be flailing about trying to figure out stuff. We want to figure it out, do the hard work, and then we want to get to work. We want to get to tilling that soil, planting the seeds, because we want to trust that fruit will come. So we're going to prioritize things that will bear more fruit over things that will bear less fruit. That might sound obvious, but when you think in terms of eternal fruit, we're not going to just spend our money, our resources. We're not going to invest in ways that just maximize return. We're going to invest in ways that maximize kingdom return, Lord willing. And so we're thinking through that category as we go about investing our money, investing our time, investing our skill, our resources, things like that. So that's the number 2 component of our family vision statement. We have a mission statement, our core values, and finally, the in-vision statements. Now, what do I mean by in-vision statements? This is where I kind of come to life as the visionary of our household. Is I like to envision, if we live this out, what's the future going to look like? I talked about that a little bit in the last episode, but this is where really the rubber meets the road. And so I'll just read you some of the envision statements that I have around family culture and around the future of our household. Here's one that says, we envision a joyful, content, healthy, humble family who cares deeply for each other and all those who enter our home. Okay. Simple enough. So as you envision that, what does it mean to have a joyful household? Well, we want kids who play. We want kids as they grow, they laugh together. We joke together. My second daughter is a prankster. And part of the reason she's a prankster is because I'm a prankster and I like to have fun with her. And she's learned that, and they have fun with each other. I envision a joy-filled home. Well, this is going to govern me when I'm tired at night and I don't want to do family worship. I don't want to engage with the kids. I don't want to wrestle with them because I'm tired. But I read this envision statement. I think, man, I want a joyful household. I'm envisioning a joyful household that is healthy, that is content. They're loving toward one another. Well, as the head, I need to step into that in order to see that vision come to pass. Another one is we envision an active family who goes on adventures together regularly and has the means to do so. What do I mean by that? This particular envision statement has caused us to forego spending money in some ways because that would inhibit our ability to have the freedom to go on adventures. The reason I started a business and we were hand to mouth for so many years is because we valued freedom and adventure much more than we valued financial gain. Now, that's just how we're hardwired. Again, this goes all the way back to the core value statements, the core values that the Lord has hardwired us to prioritize those things. I'll just read you one more. So we have 4 daughters. So we envision daughters who serve the Lord as wives and as mothers and take great joy in obeying him even to the ends of the earth if need be. So we're envisioning daughters who have a Godward orientation, and in their Godward orientation, they have a homeward orientation in that they don't just settle for being a wife or being a mother, but we show them the joy and the magnitude of what it means to be a wife, to be a mother. We can see them raising children and building godly households, not just as a concession to some feminist career thing, but as the primary aim to want those things, to treasure children who are a blessing and the household that is healthy, that begets covenant children. So that's our family vision statement. Again, you can go to fiercemen.us/vision to find that ebook that will help you walk through that for yourselves. However, I'm not trying to say imitate me, although Paul would say imitate Paul as he imitates Christ. I'm only saying this is an example to get you thinking. The Lord has given you wisdom. The Lord has given you the Holy Spirit. You have the ability to think through what would work best for your family. But the whole point is that we don't want to be flailing and sprawling and wondering where we should be going as men, but instead we want to take the time, create the vision, and then cast the vision, and then live out the vision. And that starts, I think, with a mission statement, which is your big why. And then the core values is the who you are. And then the envision statements is what fruit is that going to bear into the future? So as men, you are the leader in your household. You are the God-ordained leader in your household as the head of that household. And my prayer is that you would step into that role more fully and you would begin to take agency and to say it. I am the God-ordained household leader for my wife, for my children. And that as you own it, your children will flourish again under your care. In the coming weeks, we're going to continue talking about what it means to think in terms of legacy or even dynasty. What does it mean to build generational wealth so that your children don't have to wait until they're in their 40s and 50s to enjoy the life that you're building for them right now? How can we be thinking in those categories? How can we be thinking not just decades out, but even centuries out in terms of how we are instilling faith into our children in a way that they will not just be disciples of Christ, but they will be disciplers of future disciples of Christ who will then be disciplers of future disciples of Christ. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about, have a good buddy on where we talk about demystifying acquiring a small business and what it means to be an owner of a business, to create even things like passive income, to be an absentee owner even of a business. How do we invest our time and money in a way that's scalable, all in the name of being on mission for Christ in our heads, hearts, households, and homelands? So that's it for now. I hope this has been a blessing to you. As you begin this year, be thinking through what this year could entail. And one of the things I'm hoping for is that you would engage in the Fierce Men community because we need each other. So if you haven't yet, go to fiercemen.us, find that green button, join the band, get in there. If you're struggling with the marriage, if you're struggling with sin, pornography, things like that, those men there are there to help you, to give you verses, to give you encouragement, to pray with you. And as you'll see in that group, we're going to have some gatherings over the next year in various regions throughout the U.S. And Lord willing, there's one near you where you can maybe drive a couple hours or hop on a short flight to join us for a quick retreat. And then as a final reminder, if you haven't yet, please do subscribe, find the podcast wherever you get yours, and make sure you share it with a friend or two so that we can build this movement, so that we can see our households and our communities more submitted to Christ, and flourishing under his supreme care. That's it for now. Fierce men, rise up. You are God's appointed leader in your household. It's time to step into it. Gird them up, keep them lit. Lord willing, I'll see you next time.